I'm so grateful today to be sitting with Reverend Christine Monks. She is a dynamic new demonstration for Centers for Spiritual Living as a minister. She's a longtime Mile Higher, and I've invited her to speak today to talk a little bit about her calling to ministry, as well as um, looking at human dignity in our country presently right now, and how we can respond to it with grace and consciousness, but also with a sense of urgency. So I know that's a lot, Christine, to start about, and you may have different intentions for our conversation. But I'm interested in knowing, Christine, a little bit about your call to ministry and what calls you to be a minister in 2025. These interesting times.
Thank you, Josh. I'm really excited to be here. If I think back along my path to ministry, it began in 2017 when I enrolled in Beyond Limits. And I am a transgender woman, and I enrolled in Beyond Limits as Robert, and I finished Beyond Limits as Christine. And that means I transitioned from male to female during that class. And from there, I went on to take all the rest of the prerequisite courses for becoming a practitioner. And I started practitioner training in 2019, finished that in 2021, and enrolled in ministerial school and graduated last year and passed my panels. So it's interesting that my journey as a transgender woman is so interwoven with my journey as a minister that it seems improbable to me that those are not somehow aligned in a divine way.
Yeah, I think that some of us are called to ministry to help other people, and some of us are called to live our own path fully and completely, our own growth path, and then find it benefits others. I wonder if that latter is true for you.
Yeah, that's interesting that you would start with that, because I am doing this because this is who I am, and before I decided to transition, I didn't want to die with no one knowing who I really am. Mm-hmm. So that was a really big motivation. Somehow me standing in my truth and doing something that people think is really courageous has caused others to find inspiration in my journey. And that was one of the most surprising things about this, is that anyone was even paying attention to me. Mm-hmm. Because for most of my life, I attempted to stay hidden, lest anyone see this deep, dark secret that since I was a child of 3 years old, I thought I should have been born a girl. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, transitioning when I did in 2017, much later than when I was 3, mm-hmm. seemed to inspire people in ways that it never occurred to me that it would.
I think it's incredibly inspiring. It's so funny because there's this part of it that's like, it's nothing special. This is Christine just being Christine. How wonderful, how great, and yet it's so profound. And when I hear you say, I didn't want to die without anyone knowing me, I'm guessing at some level too that switch from Robert to Christine that happened in Beyond Limits class may have felt just as much like a death as it did a rebirth.
It did. And yet I am so appreciative to Robert and all the life skills that he developed that kept it safe for Christine to be, albeit locked in a closet or locked in the attic for most of our life, kept her safe enough that she could come out with some life skills to deal with. Mm-hmm. So when people said we should have a wake for Robert, and some of my friends did that, I thought, well, I don't really think Robert's dead. I think maybe Robert just integrated aspects of himself into Christine so that she can exist in this world as a powerful woman with something to say.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and I love everything that you have to say. So you're a brilliant speaker and writer and leader, in so many different areas, and that's happening in our Centers for Spiritual Living movement as well. How does the path that you've walked help you in serving others in fulfilling their path, their calling? And I love this theme of being seen, helping people see themselves so that they can be seen by others and be who they really are.
I think, I've embraced things with diversity and inclusion and belonging as a member of the Centers for Spiritual Living Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I think the way this helps people be seen is it's a very common experience for us to edit aspects of ourselves in order to fit in. And I think the invitation is to hold a space for us to show up as our authentic selves. And it requires us to be vulnerable. And there are times I feel incredibly vulnerable. But I think that invites people to be seen. There's no doubt whenever my life in this incarnation ends, that I will not regret having done this. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt if I had decided that it was just never going to be my time to be seen as Christine, that would have been one of the things that would have felt as a regret or a missed opportunity at the least.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wonder, and I would say it's partially true for me as a friend of yours as well, you stepping into being Christine and getting to see her and behold her at some level serves me in better seeing Josh. Right? And in who I am, and in your vulnerability, and I don't know if there's a sense of risk, but there's certainly a hero's journey element to the path that you've been on that spurs roads of trials, supernatural help, atonement, all of these things, mastering two worlds, all of those things that come together as well. But I think also by following that path, it says, whatever your journey is, someone who's listening to you talk or hearing your story, our stories may be different, but it really is about embodying and having the courage to not just be who we are, but to become who we're meant to be.
I love Joseph Campbell's hero's journey because I think that is a metaphor for life that resonates with so many people. It certainly does with me because I had to leave that which was known and let go of it completely and go into that unknown space. Mm-hmm. As someone who was socialized as a boy, I never had socialization as a girl. Mm-hmm. So when I left Robert's identity behind and began presenting as Christine, I knew very little about how I needed to show up in the world. And there were lots of trials and tribulations, and there were lots of missteps. But through it all, my heart was in the right place in trying to authentically demonstrate who I am. Mm-hmm. And then the coming home back into my community, I wasn't able to do it all alone. I ended up doing it in full visibility, which makes it harder. Sometimes it's easier to leave and then come back all transformed and the hero, but I wasn't able to do that. Mm-hmm. But it's still a useful way to look at things. And it's also helped inspire me to find meaning in my life, which is another thing I think you and I share in common.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, because, there's that part of me, and this is maybe, my white maleness is, okay, this is Christine. So what? And, talking with you, learning that it's not just about being a woman, it's about being a renewed person. And so one time you shared with me, Josh, I'm Christine and I've never been in an intimate relationship before. And that was so profound and kind of exciting to me. I had not even thought about categorizing that way. So, you're in a way, being this person that you've always been that you've never gotten to be before. And she's starting at square one with all of this wisdom and information, but in such a new way. And I've got to think that that's both exciting and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. It's one thing to observe something from the outside, imagining yourself to be part of that inner circle. And then it's another thing to walk into that inner circle and realize you don't know any of the ground rules. And that would be the inner circle for me, would be stepping into my truth as a woman. I observed women. I always admired women. I always wanted to be a woman. But no one other than me ever saw myself that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't ever have a mother-daughter talk with my mom. And I always was really careful to not appear creepy to women. I mean, I used to laugh and say it probably would have been easier if I'd been gay, because then probably they would have accepted more of this behavior that you don't typically find in men when they're trying to connect with women, unless they're trying to hit on them or do something else that perhaps most women don't really want to have happen. So it's, it's an interesting journey. And one of the interesting aspects of it is that everyone has an opinion on people like me, right? They don't even have to know me to have an opinion. And it's kind of humbling, because as a white male, not everybody had an opinion like that, or at least there were enough other white males that it was easy to get lost in the crowd and not have yourself be the object of people's judgment or scorn or criticism or whatever.
And that's something I wanted to ask you about today too. And I wonder, it's a twofold question. The synchronicity in your own personal path of becoming a minister, and it's 2025, and of course, transgender people who have, in some cases in history, been honored and cherished, but for the most part, there's a lot of secretive nature, a lot of discrimination, and we're here in a public media that has made being trans a opportunity for visceral. We have legislators using it as a political football, discriminating against rights that have been granted in some of these instances. And so it's kind of a scary time for the trans community. And I'm interested, first of all, in hearing why do you think you became a minister right now, during these times, as well as just your thoughts on what you're seeing in, the word that we would use is just the collective consciousness around being trans, as in my experience, more courageous people are stepping into the truth of who they are. There's no more trans folks than there ever was, but the opportunities, because we believe in liberty, is to become that. And yet it is a very hard journey for so many, as well, many who are thinking twice about it right now because of the climate in the country.
There is a lot to unpack in that. The thing that I was responding to that caused me to transition, I told you about wanting to be seen and not wanting to die with no one knowing who I was. I was also seeking to find my voice. So there were a couple of things, but it all revolved around trying to find my life's purpose. And the answer I got to that prayer, that meditative thing that I was doing around 2016, 2017, was just be yourself. And that seems so simple. In fact, I was rather judgmental on, the supreme being, God, whatever name you want to call it. It's like, really, that's it? Don't I not have any higher purpose than just being myself? And then I had to realize that I had never had the courage to be myself. So that may be a circuitous way to get back to why am I a minister at this time? And I think it's to be myself and just to show how much courage sometimes it takes to be ourselves. I never imagined that the political environment that we're existing in right now would be so aligned with me transitioning. I availed myself of the ability to transition genders and sex at a time where not a whole lot of people were paying a big attention to it. It seemed like more people were identifying as trans. But I have theories on that too, as far as the restrictive gender roles that we want to place people in. But currently, it's a really scary time. I have no assurance right now that I'm going to be able to renew my passport or my driver's license or my global entry with a female gender marker. And I have to get to where I can just be okay if that's how it turns out. That I don't have to have that affirmation to know who I am. And yet it can be so dysphoric and unsafe for me to walk around with a driver's license that says male, or the states that are passing laws that says I have to use a men's bathroom, or if, God forbid, I would be arrested and be thrown in a male prison. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And I come back to my spiritual practice of staying in the present, because if I start going out 2 years to when my passport renews and some other things like that, I can just get into a really dark place. And so I don't know. I think I'm not angry at anyone about why I was unable to transition for most of my life. They were my own restrictions and those of shame about a boy wanting to be a girl. I think I'm articulate in a way about this, that there's a possibility that people could be curious about what would inspire someone to do this, and just hold a space for listening or maybe having their opinion opened up or broadened. Yeah. I mean, I think back to the Science of Mind article that I wrote in 2023 at your encouragement because of a paper I had written for one of my ministerial classes. It's interesting because that paper was a very self-revealing and vulnerable statement about who I am as a human being. And I wrote it for an audience of one, which was you. And I felt really vulnerable sharing that with you when I did. And then when you said, I think you ought to submit this, I think this is highly publishable, there was a lot of stepping into that courage for me that I hadn't realized that. So is this mine to do? Mm-hmm. Is this mine to say? And how will people see that if I share myself vulnerably? So I guess there's a lot on this, as I said, to unpack. And I don't know whether I've gone off on some tangent of the question, but all these things kind of come up when we talk about it. I don't feel safe a lot of the time right now, Josh.
And you're sharing that means a lot to me, because there's part of me that watches the news and watches all this, and we can get into Trump this and Trump that and DEI this and that, and there's all that kind of stuff. But for you to share the real life practical fears that you have to deal with right now and your preparation to deal with them no matter what, it shows me that the danger when someone's used as a political football to fight DEI or fight this cultural thing. Oh, we're going to go after this group because it's an easy one, and the incredible consequences it has, not only for transgender people, but for the rights of liberty and freedom for each and every individual that so many of us hold dear in this country, not only for ourselves, but for other people as well. And so, just your sharing that opens my eyes a little bit more. I hope it opens the eyes of the listener to, look into not only what is being said on social media, but what's going on in state legislatures, what's going on in the U.S. Congress about an issue of human dignity. And as oneness people, we hold human dignity as one of the most sacred things that there is. And yes, we do have to adjust. And yes, we have to deal with discrimination. And yes, we have to deal with this world that we live in, and how important to have our eyes open and clear and to continue to hold that vision of people getting to live fully in their freedom. And when people choose to be the truth of who they are, it inspires so many of us. And I think that you, Christine, are some vitamin C for all of us and for the world in just you choosing to live your path and you choosing to be vulnerable, and it inspires others. And I'm really glad to know you, and I hope we can continue this conversation at a later time.
I'd love that. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much.